Welcome to the Widowed Mom Podcast, episode 287, Widows Unfiltered, an interview with Amy Krill.
Welcome to the Widowed Mom Podcast, the only podcast that offers a proven process to help you work through your grief, to grow, evolve, and create a future you can truly look forward to. Here's your host, Master Certified Life Coach, Grief Expert, Widow, and Mom, Krista St-Germain.
Hey there, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I've got a good interview for you. You're going to love Amy. She is, and I said this in our interview, but she's one of the most open-hearted people that I know. She is just a genuinely kind, loving human, and I think you're going to resonate with her story. So with that, enjoy my interview with Amy Krill.
Okay.
Welcome. Yeah. I'm so glad to have you, Amy. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Krista.
Yeah. So I'm going to have you just tell listeners a little bit about who you are. What brought you here?
Well, I'm Amy, and 4 years ago, my husband passed away unexpectedly. And he, passed away in a way that was pretty traumatic for us.
Yeah.
And I very quickly fell into, the stir of grief, the flurry of so much going on around you, whether it be your feelings or the to-dos or what have you, and just became overwhelmed very quickly with life.
Yeah. Did you listen to the podcast first? I don't even remember. When you said 4 years, I'm like, wow, is it really 4 years?
Yeah, it's over 4 years. So it was 4.5 years ago, almost 4.5 years ago. And, I had a career for many, many years and was quite, involved in my career and my company. And my husband and Jason and I had been talking about me moving out of that line of work and starting my own life coaching business. And so at the time, I had just signed up to go to Brooke Castillo's life school. And when he died, I knew very quickly that I needed help. And so I went back to Brooke's podcast, started listening to it, and immediately knew that wasn't what I needed. And so I started looking for life coaches who, this is within like 2 weeks of his passing.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Started looking for life coaches who were widows. And I found one that I listened to, and she was great, but I knew she wasn't quite right for me. And then I found you secondarily and started listening to your podcast. And right away, you were so relatable. Your language that you used, your experience, everything was just so relatable for me. And so I just ate it up. I listened, like so many other women who've joined your program. I listened to all your podcasts, binged them. That's the word I'm looking for. I binged them over and over and over again until I was all the way through. And then eventually reached out to you to talk to you about joining the program. I just knew that I needed something. I was very committed to living an intentional life prior to Jason passing away and had been for years. And not that I wanted to fix what was wrong, but I knew I wanted to process everything and figure out, as you say, figure out how to create a life I can love, even though I had just lost my partner in crime.
Yeah. It's not super common that 2 weeks after losing their person that people are like, life coaching, that's what I need. So you must have had a pretty solid, experience of it before or knowledge of it before. If you be one.
I hadn't worked with a life coach, but I was, in my line of work, I coached people all the time. And I had also done a series of group life coaching programs in my barn for fun and for free. So it was kind of my thing, right? It was something I believed in. So I did have a therapist for a while after Jason passed. I would say the first 6 months, and she was
Mhm.
great. She helped me mostly with, um, some things around like dynamics that I was dealing with family, and
Mhm.
but we weren't focused, and also like just the emotions that were running through my body, like that
Yeah.
initial craziness that you feel. But I knew I needed something different than that. And so
Mhm.
that was, I was listening on the sidelines
Yeah. Yeah.
of
So when
therapy.
Jason died, not that you have to tell us all of your grief experiences, but how
Yeah.
did what you experienced after he died compared to grief that you had experienced in the past?
Um, wow. Okay. So that's not something I've thought about. I had a few years before Jason died, my best friend Bobby died.
Hmm.
And that was very sudden and unexpected. And I, I'm not sure exactly. I mean, I remember being so shocked at how
Mhm.
it affected me emotionally. Like it took me down in a way
When
that I
Bobby
wasn't
died or when
yeah, it
Jason? Yeah. Mhm.
shattered
Yeah.
me. And when Jason died, yes, I was heartbroken and all those feelings, but
Mhm.
I was very quickly able to, like, I realized that everything was going to be okay. Like, I knew
Hmm.
that. I
Hmm.
had this inner knowing. And maybe, like I've said before, that I've almost felt like, I feel like gifts come out of
Mhm.
difficult times.
Mhm.
And I felt like Bobby's departure and death sort of provided me with a knowing when
Mm.
my own husband passed that I would be okay.
Mm. Yeah.
I don't
I
know.
love that.
Not sure I know how to explain that. I also, I also had Bobby like connect with me spiritually
Mm.
after his passing, and he still does. And so I knew I had a knowing also then that would come with Jason. It took a long time for
Mm.
me to feel it in the way I felt it.
Mm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
does
Is
that
that
answer the
something?
question?
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating how different it is for everyone, right? Some people
Mhm.
um, absolutely, thought that they experienced an intense grief before and then have never experienced anything like this. Some people
Oh
feel,
yeah.
like prior experiences prepared them for experience.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm always just
There's,
curious.
I mean, I shouldn't say this, but no, I'm not going to say it. But the shock of losing your partner and the impact it has on you physically, emotionally, all of that, I could never have been prepared for.
Mm-hmm.
So, the physical toll that Jason's departure took on me was
Mm-hmm.
incredible and surprising. And that is, when I started working with you, that was one of the things that started to shift for me in such a big
Mm-hmm.
way was uh, even though I thought I was dealing so well, there were things that were locked up inside of me that were causing me, I guess I would say, illness
Mm-hmm.
or disease internally because there was such physical um, pain
Mm-hmm.
and brain fog and all of
Yeah.
those kinds of things. So I didn't have that with Bobby. He
Mm-hmm.
he didn't live with me. He wasn't in my every moment of every day.
Yeah.
Still every morning when I grind coffee, what do I think of? Jason. That's it.
Yeah.
Every single morning.
Yeah.
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 So that's different.
Yeah. And also, I mean, I don't know, the circumstances around different people's deaths in our lives are different too. And so I do
Hmm.
think for me, for sure, even though I had lost people close to me before Hugo, the way in which Hugo died and the trauma around that was also for me a
Oh
whole
yeah.
nother level of support that I needed that I really hadn't had anything in my life match that. Um,
Absolutely.
so yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, no,
So
the trauma part of it.
yeah, and also just being a parent, right? And like, when you lose a friend and you've got your partner's support to help you process it, or to at least maybe handle the parenting part while you're, coming out of that.
Right.
But then to not have that and to have to be the parent, even if your kids are older, right? I think there is this just like survival mode that sometimes kicks in,
Oh, big time.
because what other choice is there, you
There
know?
is no other choice. You
Yeah.
have to survive.
Yeah.
I mean, there
Yeah.
is another choice,
Right. But yeah. Right.
but right.
Yes.
We're not going
Always
to
good
choose
to
that.
remind ourselves we are actually choosing, and we can be proud of ourselves
Yes.
for that. Yeah.
Yes. I learned that from you
Well,
for sure.
that's because I'm always like pushing it back to people. Somebody told me this week, and
Yeah,
she was like, you need to be able to take a compliment. I'm like, it's not that I don't want to take a compliment. It's that I want to keep reminding people of how powerful they are, because
totally.
I think that matters
Totally.
so much. So, what made you, you said that you were noticing that there were physical impacts of what was going
Hmm.
on in your grief. What helped you connect the dots to figure that out? What was most supportive for you to deal with that and support yourself? Like, what worked for you? And this is not
Yeah.
advertisement for coaching, right? Like legit,
No,
what
no,
worked
no,
for you?
no. Definitely not. So I mean, a few things like my best friend reminded me of this the other day, was that I really resourced myself.
Mm,
And I think that's huge when you become a widow or when you have some kind of tragedy like this, whether it be, an illness that you have or the loss of even a job or whatever. Like resourcing yourself while you're going through this hard time is so key. I made sure that, I allowed people in, right? Like
mm-hmm,
that I definitely had a lot of people show up for me, but I allowed them to show up for me.
mm-hmm,
And I let them do things like get me a dozen eggs,
mm-hmm,
I had a friend who paid for a chef to come in and cook food for myself and my son. My 18-year-old left for college 2 weeks after Jason died.
mm-hmm,
And someone came in and cooked for Colton and me. And that was incredible because Jason was our chef.
mm,
And so I was able to work with this person and have food made. And then a couple weeks later, I was like, I'm not eating again. I'm not feeding my son again. And so what can I do? I don't want to
mm,
cook. That stresses me out. So what did I do? I hired the chef to come back in and create some
mm-hmm,
food that was food we would love,
mm-hmm.
not just what would be delivered to us
Yeah.
by community. That didn't work for
Yes.
me
The
as
the
well.
yeah, the tater tot casseroles,
Oh yeah,
maybe not so much.
definitely.
Yeah.
Not so much. So I resourced myself with a chef. I resourced myself with a therapist. I eventually hired you and as a life
Mm-hmm.
coach and joined your group. I, made sure that I had some spiritual support around me and that
Mm-hmm.
I gave myself space to also enjoy life, right? You talk
Yeah.
about what is it,
Dual process model. Mm-hmm.
the dual process model. Thank you. Spending some time on grief, but also spending some time in other spaces like
Mm-hmm.
going to live music or spending time with friends, whatever, going for a swim, whatever
Mm-hmm.
that might be. And so I made sure that I was resourcing myself properly so that I could deal with it. And the interesting thing is that after I did that for myself, I had a couple people in my community who went through a hard time.
Mm-hmm.
And I immediately was like, oh my gosh, this is what we need to do for these people.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And pulled people together and identified who do we need? What do we need to do to help this person? Not just the food train, but
Mm-hmm.
can we help them check their emails? Can we take the dog to the vet? Can we walk the dog? Those
Mm-hmm.
kinds of things. So resourcing yourself in creative ways that we don't always think about. Oh, I also hired a personal assistant for a little while
Really?
because, oh, it was amazing. And she became one of my best friends. And we didn't have our affairs in order. There was a lot to deal with. I had a business to close. I had children to raise. I still had my career. It was COVID. There was so much to deal with. I had two properties to manage, and they were large properties. And so I hired a friend of a group of my friends, and she came and sat in the dining room while I sat in Jason's office, and we worked side by side on managing my life.
Mm.
And it was incredible. It was so resourcing yourself,
Yeah.
I guess is my big answer.
Was any of that hard for you to do because you said, I resource myself and I let myself have it? Did you have to have conversations with yourself about letting yourself have
Yes,
those resources?
absolutely. Absolutely. I have a lot of issues around money, like fear.
Hmm.
I have some beliefs, some old beliefs from childhood that
Yeah.
still, show up in my brain.
Hmm.
And so, and I heard Jason a lot, telling me, don't spend money. We got to save. We're saving for retirement, blah, 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 right?
Hmm.
And so put the money out there to spend on any of this stuff
Hmm.
was totally against my grain
How did
and what
you
my
how did you wrestle with that and ultimately let yourself have it? Because I know
some
you're
of
not
it,
alone in that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I guess, I mean, some of it was coaching
Yeah.
and some of it was my own self-coaching
Hmm.
and reminding myself that like, whoa, this is not a normal time.
Hmm.
And the only way that I can be my best, especially for my kids, is to not completely fall apart. I mean,
Hmm.
I was already falling apart, right? I mean, I was
Yeah.
going through all the hard emotions and the devastation. Um, but I just kept reminding myself and talking to myself about the fact that this was okay for a period of time
Hmm.
and I can be proud of myself. Like
Hmm.
I can put those other voices aside and I don't know. I just gave myself the permission.
I wish more of us did that.
I do too. I do too. I mean, I think I gave myself one of the greatest gifts
Yeah, for sure. I
by giving
also
myself that permission.
I also believe or have witnessed that I know that you were able to receive, but I also watched you draw some protective boundaries, right? Like decide what was healthy for you and what wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so not that you have to talk about that in great detail or
Yeah.
anything, but I see the benefit of how you did both of those things, right? Because sometimes it's hard
Mm-hmm.
in some ways it can be hard to receive, but in other ways it can be hard to, make sure that what we are receiving is healthy because there are people who want to give us things that maybe aren't what we need, and figuring
Oh,
that
yeah.
out can be hard.
Yes, I had a lot of that, and with some of my closest people in my life,
Hmm.
that wanted to, and I don't know if this is what you were thinking about, but I had people in my life who are some of my closest people who they were probably just about as devastated as I
Hmm.
was at Jason's passing. And they wanted so badly, they needed to help and support and love and myself and my kids. And they showed up in ways that worked. And then they also showed up in ways that were really hard for me
Hmm.
and for my kids. And I had to address that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And that was really hard for me because I know it was all coming from such a place of love.
Hmm.
And as much as I wanted to let people into love, I had to go with my gut. There were there were things that if I allowed my inner critic, if I allowed my mother's voice, if I allowed society's voice, if I allowed all these voices to come in,
Hmm.
I would never have gone with my gut and what my truth was.
Hmm.
And there were there was like like I said, it was COVID. My son had moved into our barn during
Hmm.
COVID before Jason died, 15 years old, and he had moved into our barn. He wanted space, and we were like, cool, have fun. And the barn was finished upstairs, so it wasn't like
Hmm.
he was sleeping in
It's not
hay.
sleeping in the hay, right?
No, although that would have been fine too. But he was living in the barn, and there's a bathroom up there, there's a TV, he's got everything he needs. And he came home all the time, to watch TV with us or have dinner
Hmm.
or connect or whatever. But after Jason died, he stayed in the barn.
Mm.
And Emmy left for Hawaii. He stayed in the barn, and I was in the house all by myself. And people were worried. They were
Mm.
worried about me being home alone. They were worried about him being in the barn. And I had uh, I had all these voices coming at me, even ones that weren't really coming at me, but they were just in my brain.
Hmm.
And I had to stay true to myself and trust myself.
Hmm.
I asked him if he wanted to come back in the house. He didn't want to, like I had to trust that he was right where he needed to be. And
Hmm.
he was on his journey.
Hmm.
And I'm so glad that I did not force him, because what I've learned about him over the last 4 years
Hmm.
is space is the greatest thing for him.
Yeah. And
And
everyone's so
listen
different.
to myself. Everyone's so different. And he was with Jason when he died. So how in the world could I possibly have any idea
Hmm.
what he really needs?
Yeah.
And I had to trust him.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of us, I think, come to this experience not having a strong history of trusting ourselves.
Yeah,
It can be
totally.
really hard when you need it most and you don't
Yes.
have that muscle practiced to be able to do that.
Yeah. And I didn't always trust myself. As you know, you spent many days coaching me through tears of not trusting myself. And but that's the work. That's the mind work, the brain work,
Hmm.
the thought work is what we have to keep doing over and over and over
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
I do it every day. I did it this morning preparing to talk to you.
Oh, I love it. I love it. When you think back and listen to those people listening, I provide this list of questions that I'm probably going to ask, and then I don't ask anything on that list. So I just throw things at people. So here we go. But I'm curious, when you look back, what were some of the things that you thought would be harder or more difficult that didn't turn out to be? And what were some things that you wouldn't have anticipated would have been hard or difficult that really surprised you and were difficult?
Yeah, I was surprised. Um, hmm. I was surprised at how hard it, I'm not sure if, like, I was surprised at how hard the holidays were going to
Mm.
become. I'm going to talk about holidays because they're really on my mind. We're coming
Okay.
into the
Yeah.
holidays. And I know everyone talks about holidays being hard. Um, I guess I knew the holidays would be hard. I didn't know the holidays were going to change so much.
Mm.
So, like, everything changed.
Mm-hmm.
My mother-in-law basically, you know, stopped being with us on the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
Jason's best friend stopped being with us on the holidays. The kid's uncle stopped being with us on the
Mm.
holidays. So, like, I expected the holidays to be hard. I didn't know everyone was going to I'm going to put the language in there, abandon us in
Mm.
the
Yeah.
process. And so that was confusing. Like, that was really hard for me to navigate emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I knew holidays would be hard. I didn't know they would be so complicated. And then, something we haven't touched on, I don't think, is that I'm remarried now.
Yeah.
So, and now I have two stepdaughters. And I didn't realize until I was in it how complicated that is to organize because, you know, they
Mm-hmm.
have a mom who's
Mm-hmm.
wonderful, but like they want to be with their, so I'm trying to navigate like how do I bring a family together when they're all
Mm-hmm.
four adults, young adults, all the same age, and scattered across the country and have different needs and dynamics. And so that's something that has been surprisingly really difficult for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes so
Um,
much sense.
and then I think another thing that comes to mind for me is, you know, I've moved since Jason passed away, and I'm living in a new community and a whole new world,
Mm-hmm.
and I have new people in my life. And I didn't, there was a part of me that was like, oh, you know, I'm going to meet new people and start this new life. Um, but, but like, and I knew in my head that like your grief is everywhere. I wasn't
Yeah.
moving to run away. I was moving
Yeah.
forward and moving towards something. Um, but I didn't realize, number one, how much like he's still so present in everything I do,
Mm-hmm.
everything, all day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that, and that's good. I'm good with that because I want him to be. You know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
my husband says it's you, me, and Jason. And it is. It's like, you know, a trio. Not always, but and then and then but even meeting people, right? I have this whole new community of people in my life, and
Mm-hmm.
my need for them to know my story and to know him and to know
Mm-hmm.
that that's a part of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not sure if that's hard necessarily as much as like it's just been a surprise.
Mm-hmm. Well, from where I it's a super authentic example of how it can be. Like, um,
Hmm.
I don't always have, I feel like a huge window into what happens when I'm not there, in like other people's
Yeah.
personal life, but you are so open. And what I have seen from where I sit is that you've never a lot of people apologize for their grief, and stop
Mm.
talking about their person or can't figure out how
Hmm.
to navigate the memories into the new life. And
Right.
that is definitely not what I have seen you do.
Yeah, I think I've gone the opposite
Mm-hmm.
direction for sure. And it feels really good and healthy for me,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Like I feel like I'm the keeper of Jason
Mm-hmm.
and his memory, and like I feel a responsibility to him, but only because it's what I want to do. Like it feels real for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, I talk to his friends all the time. I'm now in
Mm-hmm.
their group text to be like his high school buddies. They put me in when Jason passed away. So
Oh.
that, you know, it's like a daily group text thing, right?
Oh.
And it just feels like so like I'm honored to be able to continue to carry that light
Wow.
for him, but for us.
I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that their late husband's friends put them in the group text. Like,
Mm.
I think that's a new one for me. And I love it. I
I
love
love
it.
it. Yeah.
I got an email from somebody the other day, and she was like, I don't think I want to be, I don't think I'm ready for coaching because I'm not ready to date again. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe I need to be a little more specific because I've noticed, sometimes when I invite former clients like you to come on the podcast,
Yeah.
you might be in a relationship, right? But
Right.
never my goal, never the idea that you have to be in a relationship to be happy again. Of course not. So knowing that, how did you decide? Like, what was your decision process like before you decided, okay, I do want to date again? Can you like walk us through that?
Yeah. So first of all, it was my daughter's decision initially. My 18-year-old was on Bumble.
Oh, I'll create the
And
profile for you, Mom. Don't you worry.
and I said, "Oh, that's funny. I got on Bumble recently."
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, you did, and so we were just talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, let's check out the talent. I'm like, yeah, I'm not really ready to, date. And she's like, well, let's just look at what the talent looks like at
The
50.
talent.
And so she like played on my thing and fixed my
Uh-huh.
profile. And so I was like, what a, it's not a big deal. I could maybe go on a date. Um, I just, I had the desire to go on a date
Mm-hmm.
just to try it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure there was a whole lot of thought going into
Okay.
this yet.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
This is just my story. And they were awful. Like
Mm.
they weren't they were fine. The guys were fine, but I was like, oh, these are not the people for me.
Uh-huh.
And I was not ready. Okay. So, I had listened to um your podcast on dating, like
Mm-hmm.
the how to know when you're
Like how
ready,
to know when you're
right?
ready. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I knew I wasn't ready. And then there was something in one of your coaching calls. I can't remember what it was, but there was something that came up. And what I was struck with was, oh, I need to think about what do I want in a future partner
Mm-hmm.
down the road if I ever have a future partner. I wasn't really planning on dating. I definitely wasn't planning on getting married again. I was working on figuring out how to love life. And I was loving life even though I was in the midst of such tragic grief, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was doing amazing things with amazing people and like living life to the fullest at the same time that I was sometimes on the floor,
Mm-hmm.
curled up in a ball
Yeah.
and feeling completely broken. So I was doing both. And I decided to sit down and think about Jason really critically. What did I love about him?
Mm-hmm.
What would I want in a future person? And what would I want to leave behind?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, what were some things about him or our relationship or how we were together that I'd want to leave behind?
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really good exercise. And then I took it a step further. I dove into like my own languages of love and the things that were important to me that had nothing to do with Jason.
Mm-hmm.
And like I like literally defined this human
Mm.
that I would want to meet at some point in my life. But there was so much about it that was about me loving my life
Yeah.
and me being in my power and me finding my inner like queen. People were calling me a queen at the time, which was so corny, but like it was something I needed to like really tap into, right?
Mm-hmm.
That inner badass.
Yeah.
And so this person needed to be able to come into that and be able to honor that and add to that, not ever diminish it.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that was my process. And then oddly enough, very soon after that, Dom fell into my life, like literally, like I think Jason and Bobby went like, oh, that's what she wants. Okay, here he is.
Oh.
And like dropped him.
Uh-huh.
And I guess the thing I would want to tell the women out there is that, I mean, I fell in love really hard, really fast. Um, it was incredible and it was incredibly hard.
Mm.
I, it was early. I met him a year after Jason died. Um, and it
I mean, and I
it
think
wasn't.
early is a highly relative term,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
by
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
way.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, yes. Let's take that out of there. It doesn't
Oh
matter
no, like if
when you
it
meet
felt
somebody,
early
but
for you, but
it
like,
felt early to
just
me.
yeah,
It
some
felt
people will be
early to
like,
me.
it's only been 5 years, and some other people will be like, like
Yeah.
who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and of course I had so many people like right after Jason died said, "Oh, you're young. You'll meet someone." And I was like,
F you.
"Screw that." Yeah, I almost put my fingers up. Because double fingers. I was like, "Are you kidding?" And a lot of his friends, like his closest friends, said things like that to me. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it was just them wanting to feel like I was going to be okay.
Sure.
But But I guess what they don't realize is that women can be okay without a man
Thank you.
or without a
Yeah.
partner, I should say.
Yeah.
That we can be okay without a partner and we can have our own backs. Um, but it was really hard because, like, even though I was in this incredibly amazing experience with this person
Mm-hmm.
and falling head over heels, I was managing so many difficult thoughts about, like, guilt, not guilt towards Jason. I never had guilt towards Jason, even though we never talked about like giving each other permission, which I think everybody should,
Mm-hmm.
but or could. But I, it was more around like guilt towards my kids, guilt
Mm.
towards, a couple of people, only 2 or 3 people were upset that I was dating beyond my kids.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I had so much like guilt around. I decided to sell my house a year earlier than Jason and I were planning. I decided to quit my job, like all these
Mm-hmm.
things that really didn't have to do with Dom, but they got amplified
Mm.
because I think because I was in this relationship. And then fast forward a year later or 2 years later, I guess, I'm I've moved with him, I've married him,
Mm-hmm.
and now all these like grief things are popping up that
Mm.
maybe I had delayed a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I had done all this work on myself, but then it was almost like I put a little pause in there. I
Mm.
was so focused on all my change and adventure and moving forward and like all of that that I then found myself needing to get back into the work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I pulled out all the books for a
Mm.
second, third time, use
Mm-hmm.
the self-coaching tools over and over and over again. The first year of relationships is often so blissful.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the the truth about us starts to come out.
Really
Um,
relatable.
but it, but again, I just had to keep trusting myself through that process.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I guess my point is it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard, even when it's good. I mean, I've grown so much in this relationship, and I've had so much personal growth over
Mm-hmm.
the last few years that it's been incredible, but
Mm-hmm.
it's also been hard,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
How did how did Jason's death affect um what you saw as your purpose in life?
Mm.
And maybe also identity? Because so many of us struggle there.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always been pretty independent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in fact, when I reflect like on our wedding vows when we got married 27 years ago or whatever it was, um, I've kind of lost track all of a sudden. Oh, even those vows, I intentionally included language around like being my own
Mm-hmm.
self and like honoring that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just kind of a little bit of who I am. And, I did have a career. I did have a life outside of the home.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think what I didn't realize is how much of my identity I was like, it was not, maybe not identity, life experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I really struggled with confidence after he died. And I didn't realize that I was maybe taking my confidence, and maybe it wasn't confidence, maybe it was more of a feeling of safety and security,
Mm-hmm.
that I could trust him, that I could fall back on him, that he would catch me if I fell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I don't know if that's an identity thing, maybe it is, but I didn't, I still struggle with that.
Mm-hmm.
Even now, when I have a decision to make, a big decision to make,
Mm-hmm.
I still find that creeps in like, oh God, if Jason was here, I could talk to him about that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
So that I've had to really like work on rebuilding is
Mm-hmm.
that confidence factor. And it has sometimes eaten away at my what I would call my life purpose, which is I believe what you know,
Mm-hmm.
started with. Um, I've had such clarity about my life purpose since I was probably in like fifth grade. And it it has manifested in different ways throughout my life journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I had such a clear vision of what I wanted it to look like in this time of my life. You
Mm.
know, I have literally a physical view of what my life vision was for 55, and I'm about to turn 55 next year. And so much of it is like in place, but this one aspect, which is my career, is not. For some reason, my battery just went low. Oh, there we go.
Mm.
It wasn't plugged in all the way. Um, my that is like the one piece is around my career, and so I'm still on that labyrinth of trying to figure out,
Mm.
you know, is this a money belief issue that I have, like one of those
Mm-hmm.
fear things that is coming in? Is it really about having a career, or is it more about how I show up in the world? Like,
Mm-hmm.
am I supposed to be leaning into my retirement? Like, this is where I am right now, is trying to figure this out. And I'm giving myself this grace every day of slowing down and walking through this labyrinth of like the unknown. Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I don't think that's necessarily about Jason, but he was there. We had a plan. Everything was
Yeah.
planned out for our life.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. We were executing that retirement plan.
Mm-hmm.
And whew, whoa, like
Yeah.
what a shocker to be stopped in your tracks
Yeah.
and to now not really know how to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just learned to trust that I'm getting there wherever that is.
Yeah.
I
I love
don't
that
know if
because
I
that is how it
answered.
is, right?
Right,
Even when we
exactly.
think we have a plan and we have a clear vision, that doesn't mean it's how it's going to go. And so I love what you said about slowly walking the labyrinth. Like that really
Hmm.
is. That is how we stay present. That is how we stay
Totally.
open-hearted and yeah. And
Eh,
I I think,
go ahead.
it's hard for listeners who don't know you to appreciate the importance of what you said about your confidence and the impact of Jason's death on that. But the reason I think it's important is because I'm guessing anybody who knew you, knows you,
Mhm.
would say, wow, like that's a confident person. Not
Yeah.
very open-hearted, right? Like
Yeah.
very loving,
Right.
very giving. So I don't mean like arrogant. I just mean like she's got it together, like, you know.
Yeah. Everyone
And
thinks that.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. And so, and I think a lot of women identify that way too. And then
Hmm.
when their grief experience has them feeling, you know, unconfident or less confident in such a way that is foreign, right? That just feels so unfamiliar. It can be so wild to feel like you really were in this confident place and then not. And then it's so easy to make that mean something about you or make it mean that it's not going to come
Yeah.
back or that
Oh,
it's,
yeah.
and so it's just nice to be honest about that it is a really common experience. You did make decisions together. Like,
Huge. Hugely common. I mean, I think I've told you before, I feel like a widow magnet now in my life. You know,
yeah.
I collect widows. I
Mm-hmm.
like, I just feel this connection. And so I think because I feel that
Yeah.
connection, they just show up, right? It's that manifesting thing.
Yeah. And also, I think it's because you're a very giving person. And so, I mean, like, I just watched you and Mom
Mm.
Goes On for a long time, always cheerleading other people and encouraging them
Yeah,
and reminding them of what's inside of
yeah,
them and what they're capable of. And so, of
totally.
course, you do that
Yeah.
your
Makes
real
sense.
life, quote unquote. Yeah, that tracks. That's on brand for Amy. Yeah.
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 Yeah. And it
So,
fills me up for other people to
yeah.
feel like seen and understood. And,
Yeah.
that to me is uh, incredible.
Yeah.
And
No
that's,
surprise that you wanted to be a
yeah,
coach. Like had those visions like
yeah,
beforehand, like no surprise at all.
sure,
Yeah.
sure.
Okay, so I always hate that these are so much shorter than I want them to be. I feel like they should be longer. But anyway,
Anyway.
what I anyway, since I
Anyway, I
can't
get it.
travel time, what is it that you wish like if you could go back and talk to Amy early on after Jason died or at
Mm,
any point in the journey, um, i.e., give other widows who have been where you are advice. Wish you had learned something, wish you had known something,
yeah.
something you know now. What would you want that version of Amy to know? What would you want other listeners to know?
Um, that number one, you're going to be okay. Well, like, I really believe that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't, I knew that, but I didn't really know it. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how to explain that. Um, it was scary, it was
Mm-hmm.
scary to witness myself go through grief, all of the emotions of grief, right? It was
Mm-hmm.
scary to witness it. And yet, like, I think grieving it wholly and allowing myself to dive into it and to address all of the different aspects of grief and
Mm-hmm.
all of the different aspects of my life.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about the loss of your partner, right? It's everything. It touches everything in your life. And so to be able to really get in touch with the feelings and what was going on in my brain was
Mm-hmm.
hugely important. I changed everything in my life. I broke all the rules, but that's what I do in life. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
rule breaker, always have been. Um, and I broke all the rules, right? All the rules that you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to make big decisions your first year. Well, guess what? I broke them all, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe that rule. And
Yep.
I don't regret any of them.
Mm-hmm.
I think it would have benefited me to do some slowing down
Mm-hmm.
and some more breathing
Mm-hmm.
and stillness. And I had a pretty amazing spiritual practice
Mm-hmm.
that I focused on every morning. It was like regimented. Every morning I got up and dove into my spiritual practice.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one I designed for myself. I connected in my own way. But
Pre Jason's death or something you did
no,
after. Okay. Yeah.
after. And I still do it 4 years later.
I love it.
Yeah, and it's evolved,
Mm-hmm.
but and it's become when I have a bad moment, when I have a difficult time, when I have a fight with my husband, when I'm having a grief grenade, whatever it is, I like
Mm-hmm.
go to that place in my house. And
Mm-hmm.
just like
Mm-hmm.
it has been one of the greatest gifts to myself. So, resourcing, finding other widows. I
Yeah.
know I've said that I've been a attractor for new widows, but finding other widows, like I haven't really tapped into my ancestral widows or my
Mm-hmm.
aunts who are still alive who are widows.
Mm-hmm.
I have tapped into them emotionally inside, but not spent a lot of time talking with them. I think that would have been
Mm.
really beneficial. But I have built so many of these relationships with these women who are in the same boat, especially through Mom Goes On, that has helped me to like heal,
Yeah.
knowing that you're not alone. And by the way, I remember when Jason first died, someone had a widow reach out to me, and I was like,
Mm.
I want to be alone in this.
Mm.
I don't want to hear anyone else's story. Like,
Mm.
that was my first initial response.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 months later, I met my first widow.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody asked me to talk to her because she became a widow 2 months after me. And it was the best thing I ever did was to say yes.
What?
And I still call her my widow wife. I called her last night. I was like, I
Oh.
need a lifeline.
Oh.
she answered. And I have all these women in my life who I can relate to and who I can lean on for support and love and
Mm-hmm.
like find us. We are out there.
Yes.
That
I
is
love it.
like the most
So,
important.
so you're going to be okay.
You're going to be
Feel your
okay.
feelings, resource
Feel your feeling.
yourself, find your
Resource.
own spiritual practice that
Yes.
works. Surround yourself
Yes.
in community with other widows when you can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, I think if anybody's ever worried, if you like someday envision yourself being in a relationship and there is some part of you that is
Mm.
saying, well, I can't be in a romantic relationship anytime in the future and still, you know, carry on a daily basis in a visible
Mm.
way the memory of my person,
Yeah.
you are a great example of that is some nonsense.
That
It
is
can be done
nonsense.
in a healthy way.
Yeah. And that is a prerequisite of that next
Uh-huh.
person.
That's what I think too. Like when people are
Yeah.
so worried about it, I'm like, why are we even entertaining that we would be in relationship with people who don't honor that part of our life experience and our heart? Like it makes no
Never.
sense to me. But also it does make sense to me because I understand how we're socialized.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
yeah.
Of
I
course.
don't want it.
I
I wish we would be
understand.
like, no.
Yeah,
Like, deal
that
breaker.
thought's not allowed. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
deal breaker. That's not allowed. So
Yeah. Is there
anyway.
anything that you were hoping to talk about that I didn't ask you about?
Hmm. I don't think so. No, I mean, I think the only thing that I want to stress for people is that, it is in your power. It is in your control to do the work
Mm-hmm.
so that you can create a life you love. That doesn't
Yeah.
mean it's going to be perfect. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy. That doesn't mean you're not going to feel hard feelings. That's the human part of life. I mean,
Yeah.
but you get to choose, how do you want to show up in this life for yourself? And it's hard work, but
Mm-hmm.
it's yours for the taking.
I love it.
So
I'm so
do
glad I
it.
met you, Amy. I'm so glad.
Oh,
Thank you for
I'm so,
coming and sharing your story.
I'm
And
so surprised I didn't cry.
we can go back and do it over. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, I love it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, meeting you and being a part of Mom Goes On has been absolutely just the greatest, you know, thing for healing.
Mm.
And I just believe in it so much. I mean, I share your stuff with people all the time, and I just believe in it. And I know this isn't an advertisement, but I'm saying it because I feel it so incredibly much. And, I love you and I love the women that are in our group. So thank you so much. 3.5 years of being in the program. And then,
Wild.
even though I'm not in it on the monthly basis, I'm doing the happier holidays right now because I believe in setting myself up for success.
Mm-hmm.
And I still engage in the Slack and I connect with the women. And it's just a really important part of my life. Once a
Oh,
widow, always a widow.
I love it. Well, I'm a little biased, but I wholeheartedly co-sign everything you just said. I think it's pretty
Good.
amazing. And
It is amazing.
who would have ever thought out of something so awful, which I know Jason's death for you was awful, Hugo's
Oh,
death for me was awful. I'm not grateful for it, but also I am just so grateful that you and women like you are the people that I now know and get to work with, and that the ripple effect of what happens when we take good care of ourselves and figure out what to do in our
totally.
grief and like how that impacts the world. It's just like it's always still surreal to me every time I really give it thought. So
It's it is incredible. There are so many odd gifts that come out of something we never would have
right?
wanted.
No.
And
Yeah.
I just want to share, I was so nervous to do this morning, that lack of confidence thing, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the thought that came to me last night where I needed the lifeline to my widow wife was, if Jason hadn't died, I wouldn't be going on this podcast.
Mm.
And I was able, thanks to you and your work, to turn that around and to come up with an intentional thought. And I actually did a mega model. I came up with a ton of intentional thoughts, like, if Jason hadn't died, then this wouldn't have happened. And this would, I like came up with this list a mile long of all the gifts that I've gotten, and this being one of them. So yeah.
Well, now
it's
you're
incredible.
making me all teary, but I'm really glad to hear that. That is what it's all about. We always get to be the ones that choose, to your point earlier.
Yeah.
Such a great example of you doing
So.
that in your own life. Yeah. Okay. Keep in touch, my friend. Keep
All
me
right. Love
posted
you.
on the career labyrinth. All right.
All right. Talk to you later.
Right,
Bye.
If you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and want to create a future you can truly get excited about even after the loss of your spouse, I invite you to join my Mom Goes On coaching program. It's small group coaching just for widowed moms like you, where I'll help you figure out what's holding you back and give you the tools and support you need so you can move forward with confidence. Please don't settle for a new normal that's less than what you deserve. Go to coachingwithkrista.com and click Work With Me for details and next steps. I can't wait to meet you.